me hand over the mic to Rabbi Weissman. Hanani, it's all yours.
Thank you, Lo. Welcome, everybody. Small crowd today, but that's fine. I'll tell you just a very quick story to start with. When I was in Rabbi Tendler's shiur in YU many years ago, it was a different world back then already. So there was I think it was near one of the holiday breaks, one of the holiday vacations, when many students would be home with their families or traveling away, but some of them would still be on campus. And they asked Rabbi Tendler, would he be willing to give a shiur during that time? And if so, what was the minimum number of students that would need to be willing to come to the shiur or would be available to come to the shiur that he would be then willing to give it? He'd have to drive all the way from Muncie. He was a busy man, of course. And he said one. There was one student he'd be willing to come and give the shiur. So even if there's one participant in the class, it's worth my time and effort to give it. Okay, so we're going to do a special class today. This is something I've had in my back pocket for a while, and people have asked me now and then to give a shiur about this. This is the now famous last Gemara in Sota, one of the last Gemaras in Sota that talks about what will happen in the footsteps of Moshiach, the Ikvasa de Mashiach. There's a parallel Gemara in Sanhedrin, Parachelak, which we will look at as well. I've spoken about bits and pieces of this over past shiurim, but I don't recall that I ever went through the entire section at once and explained it. And it's become somewhat popular. Rabbis have talked about this in recent times because we all sense that Moshiach is hopefully on the way very soon. We sense that Gog and Magog is imminent. A lot of world-changing events are happening seemingly on a daily basis. So clearly, we're in very special times, and we're looking to the Torah to help guide us, to give us insight to these times. So we'll start with the Gemara in Sota. This is actually the last Mishnah. It's a brisa. It's unclear. It seems that this is a brisa. This is from Memtes Amud Beis 49b, the last page in Sota. Be'ikvus Mashiach chutzpah yiska. So Be'ikvus Mashiach, Rashi explains, we translated the footsteps of Mashiach. Rashi explains the Sof HaGolus, at the end of the Golus, at the end of the exile period, Lifnei Bias Mashiach, before Mashiach comes, right before the very end, what's going to happen? So a bunch of things are listed here. The first one is chutzpah yiska. Chutzpah, which is brazenness, a lack of respect for people who should be given respect, will increase. Now, I wrote an article about this way back in the day. I'll put the link in the chat and the description. This is 2020, at the very beginning of the COVID era, when I sensed that big things were happening and we were already entering what is probably the final stages of this period. And I wrote that there's probably no time in history in which the old timers wouldn't have said, wow, those kids have more chutzpah than ever before. This is definitely the time that Mashiach is coming. There's never been chutzpah like this. So what does it mean that chutzpah will increase if there's always chutzpah, and people will always say the chutzpah today is much worse than it was in previous times? And I explained in that very brief article that it's true that as time has gone by, the chutzpah has continued to increase and things have deteriorated. But I think that there's been a drop-off in our time like no other time before. When I first started teaching, I was in my 20s, and I was not much older than my students. I was teaching middle school, so my students were 12, 13, around then. It wasn't that long ago when I myself was on the other side of the desk, and I was a student, and I could tell a severe drop-off in just the average conduct of the students from when I was in middle school and high school to when my students were in middle school. I also taught high school in my 20s. And there was a huge difference between what was considered to be, acting out, being rude, being a quote unquote bad student when I was in school to when these kids weren't. They were able to get away with was just incredible to me. So there's been such a huge drop off in our time, and I think that there's probably never been as big a drop off in a short amount of time as there's been in our time. Okay, so that's how I would explain chutzpah yiska, that the rate of increase has gone up as well, not just the chutzpah itself. The yoker ya'amir, and price increases will also get stronger. There will be massive price increases. Now, there's been inflation many times in history. So again, what does this mean that in the times of Mashiach, there will be a lot of inflation, a lot of price increases? Again, I think in our times where we've seen hyperinflation, prices are continuously going up, there seems to be no end to it. I think that really stands apart from most other times in history. The brisa continues, Hagefen titain pirya, the hayayin biyoker. The vine will give forth its fruit. There will be grapes, which is probably a metaphor, not just talking about grapes, but it means that there will be prosperity and abundance, at least from the crops, from the produce. There will be no problem with growing food. However, nevertheless, hayayin biyoker, the wine will be very expensive. And I ask any economist, I mean, economics is basically one rule, supply and demand, right? So if the vine is giving forth its fruit, then the wine should be very cheap, right? If the farms are overflowing with produce, then food should be very inexpensive. And here just the opposite is happening, that it's very expensive. Now, Rashi in Sanhedrin, in the parallel Gemara there, he explains that because the people will be drinking so much wine, there'll be a bunch of drunkards, either because they want to wash down their troubles with wine or just because they're drunkards in general. So therefore, the wine will be very expensive, meaning even though there will be such a great supply of the wine, it will not be able to keep up with the demand for the wine. So that would resolve the economic question of how could it be that there's tons and tons of grapes and wine, and yet wine is expensive. But I would explain it even differently, not, God forbid, saying that Rashi is wrong. These statements of Chazal are explained in many, many, many different ways by our commentaries. And I'm not arguing with anybody. I'm not qualified to argue with anybody. I'm just explaining on a very, very basic, simple level how it seems to very clearly apply to our time. And probably Rashi couldn't have fathomed what I'm about to say, because I don't think this has ever really happened in history. I mean, Rashi was just explaining the way things normally work, that if there's a great abundance of wine and it's still very expensive, the only logical explanation would be that the demand far outstrips the supply. So certainly Rashi would be right about that. But what's going on today? Right, look at the land of Israel. There's no problem growing food. There's no drought. The land is fertile. There's plenty of abundance. But this is an artificial manufactured shortage. These shortages going on around the world are artificially manufactured. There's no problem growing food today. The problem is it's a manufactured crisis. The overlords who control everything with their wars and their control over the supply chain, what's going on in Israel, where they're decimating the farmland, and other parts of the world where the government is also poisoning the farmland, confiscating the farmland, making life impossible for farmers, right? So that is artificially creating a shortage, meaning the land is giving forth its fruit, no problem. God is allowing people to grow the fruit, letting it rain, everything's growing, no problem, but there's still an artificial shortage and artificial price increases. And that has probably never happened, certainly not worldwide to the extent that we've seen today, okay? Never happened before. And that's why I think this fits with our time, that we are in fact in the footsteps of Moshiach. Let's continue. Umalchus tehapech leminos. The kingdom, the government, the malchus will turn into minos. Minos is kofrim, apikarsim, people who are at war with Hashem, who either deny that the Hashem exists, or that Hashem is entirely running the world, or they're otherwise at war with Hashem. And the parallel version in Sanhedrin is a slightly different language. It says the nefcha kol hamalchus umina. It said all of the kingdoms, all of the governments will turn into this state where they are essentially waging war against the idea of Hashem, the existence of Hashem, or recognizing that Hashem exists and actually waging war with Hashem. Anyway, as ludicrous as that sounds. Okay. Now, what does this mean? The malchus, or all of the malchus? So one of my readers made an interesting observation that he emailed to me when I wrote about this. That he said that when we daven on Rosh Hashanah, which is in fact what I've been writing about in that email, we daven that the memshelas zadon, right? Kisavir memshelas zadon min haaretz. This is what we daven for on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that Hashem should get rid of the rotten kingdom, the rotten government from the world. The memshelas zadon is the willfully sinning government from the land. Now, which government are we talking about? The government of Israel, the government of America, Europe, Germany, China, Russia. It's all of them. It's one world government. It doesn't say all of the governments of the world, all of the kingdoms of the world. It's singular. And this is what we've been saying. This is what we've been praying for thousands of years. So what does that mean? Hashem should get rid of the one bad government of the world. Well, it's a one world government, a new world order where they're all in cahoots. This is Imam Shelah Zadon. It used to be that there were different kingdoms and they were rivals, and some were better than others, and some might have even been good for a time. But now it's one world government. They're all on the same page. And that's what we're davening. And in fact, what we've already been davening for, even if we didn't realize it, for Hashem to get rid of this one world evil entity that is all waging war against him. They have all turned against Hashem. Again, fits perfectly with what's going on in our time. Okay, so the Brisa continues. So the kingdom will turn into this minas, these people that are fighting against Hashem. And there's no way to rebuke them or give them Musar, right? And the odd chance that you manage to break through their exterior defenses of bodyguards and bouncers, whether with a camera, and pose them a question or give them some Musar, you can't rebuke them. You can't get through to them. There's no way of giving them Musar. There's no way of voting them out of office. There's no accountability or penalties for anything that they do. They brazenly sin against the people and against Hashem, and nothing happens to them. There's no way to rebuke them. There's no way to punish them. There's no way to prosecute them. They just go on their merry way, at least until Hashem finally steps in. Continues. Beis Vad Yeh Liznos, the gathering place of the sages, will turn into a place of prostitution and immorality. So Rashi here explains that because there will be just so few scholars, so few people studying Torah, that the gathering place where they would normally go to talk about Torah and have meetings would be empty and desolate. So it would be taken over by immoral people. And I would explain it differently again today. I'm not arguing with Rashi, Gacha. That's certainly true, in his time and place, that may have been the case. But in our day, I think it's expressing itself differently. And that is that the sages themselves, at least the chief rabbis, the official state rabbis, the brand name rabbis, are themselves the prostitutes. The meeting house of the sages has become a place of prostitution. They have prostituted themselves to whoever's paying them and giving them a job to function as a Rav and whitewash and justify all that they're doing. They themselves have become prostitutes. The Hagalil Yechare, the Galilee, will be destroyed. Well, what do we see happening right now before our eyes on a daily basis? What's happening up north, right? It's being destroyed before our eyes. The residents are being evacuated or placed in lockdown until later on they'll be, quote unquote, evacuated for their own protection. But of course, it's not for their own protection. This land is being surrendered to our enemies, taken over, and being destroyed. They're burning down the farmland. The rockets are being fired from within Israel and from outside of Israel, but all by proxies of the same one world government, with a plan to liquidate the northern territories of the Jewish people. Okay, it is being destroyed before our eyes. Givlon Yishom, the border town. The border towns will also be laid to waste. This is both the south and the north. This word is explained in many different ways. Some say that this is actually Lebanon, part of Lebanon itself, or at least the border communities by Lebanon. It's clearly happening in our eyes right now as we speak. And the people who live in the border areas will go around from city to city and will not find mercy, will not find grace. What's happening to hundreds of thousands of Jewish people, both in the south and the north, over the last year plus? They're being shuttled around from place to place as refugees, no permanent home, begging for their basic needs, living off charity or the goodwill of the government, which is really just paying them to be evacuated, right? Turning them into refugees. They will own nothing and be happy. They're being shuttled around from place to place, not being able to be settled, have no mercy. Again, when else in our history since we were exiled has this happened? It's happening exactly as it's written right here. I'm not stretching anything, taking anything out of context. It's all plain and simple. The Chachmos Sofrim Tisrach. This is also something I wrote about in 2020. I'll put the link there as well. The wisdom of the scribes, of the sages, will become spoiled. Now, this is, as I wrote in the article, I'll actually quote a few lines from the article that I wrote then, because I can't express it any better than I did back then. Okay, it indicates that the rabbis themselves are being uninterested in teaching the masses. That's one of the lines I wrote, because it could have said the people themselves don't want to learn Torah from the rabbis. It doesn't say. It's a very strange choice of words, that the wisdom of the sages, the wisdom itself, will become spoiled. So what does that mean? So here's what I wrote. Food spoils when it is left sitting around too long before being consumed. Wisdom spoils when the wise person suppresses it. In past generations, we had towering rabbinic figures who led the people in times of crisis and urged them forward when things were stable. They were not afraid to speak out about issues affecting the Jewish community and the world around them, even at great personal expense. Their names are etched in Jewish lore forever, and their contributions made it possible for us to be here today. It is specifically in our times that there is a glaring absence of such figures. We have wise rabbis and pious people, most certainly, but where is the leadership? Where is the sacrifice? Where are the voices of wisdom that are bringing us together, speaking about the real issues and moving us forward? They hardly exist. We have no shortage of tremendous Torah scholars. They tell us how we can best fulfill technical halachic requirements in times of lockdown. They give a soft Moser in general terms so that no one will be offended and no one will be moved. They urge us to say a special prayer once or twice during a worldwide upheaval, a response equally safe and benign. They expect little of us, and we have come to expect little of them. We both prefer it this way. That is the definition of wisdom becoming spoiled. It's sitting in the fridge way too long, not being taken out, not being shared, not being utilized the way it is meant to be. Okay, again, fits perfectly with our time, like no other time in our history that I can think of really as that being a statement that can identify this period of history. Okay, I don't think it's ever been like this before. V'yirei chet yimasu, those who fear sin will be rejected, right? Those who themselves fear sin will be rejected by the masses. We saw that certainly in all its glory during COVID. Those who were afraid to sin against themselves and other people were themselves outcasts. V'emes dehei nederes, this is one I also wrote about at length and spoke about in past shiurim, the truth will be hidden. Now, this is another interesting choice of words. It comes from a pasuk which we analyze when we learn Navi, but the truth will be hidden. I explained this in two different ways. One of them is the way that some of the commentaries explain it, that the word nederes, the root of the word is eder, ayin daled resh, which means a flock. It means like a flock of sheep. So what is that? The truth is like you have a little bit of truth here, a little bit of truth there, but you don't have all the truth in one place, meaning there's a kernel of truth. Everybody's got a little piece of the truth. You read the fake media, and there's a kernel of truth with a bunch of lies wrapped around it. But there is something true to the story, right? I was talking to somebody last night about October 7th. He mentioned to me, I hadn't yet heard about the drone attack and all the casualties, and he was wondering how Iron Dome didn't do anything about it. I said Iron Dome is fake. He had never heard any of this before, so he was naturally shocked, but he was very polite and respectful. We had a very interesting conversation. I pointed him to my websites. I said, look there, it'll blow your mind. And he said to me, one of the things he said, he found it very hard to believe. He said, are you saying that October 7th, nothing happened? I said, well, certainly, people were killed. A lot of bad people did many bad things and caused a lot of harm. That's definitely true. But everything else they told you about it is a total lie. Who did it, how they did it, why they did it, the details of what happened, that's all a lie. That's all a lie. This is the larger things are certainly true, but the real story around it is fake. That's MS Ederis. And even in the so-called awake crowd, there are people that are awake to certain things and they're completely blinded to other things. Like people are very awake to what happened during COVID, and they're extremely upset with me for speaking out against the Erev Rav of Israel, the IDF, and what's going on now. Very, very much as if I've lost my mind, as if the same mind that saw through COVID went completely crazy when it comes to looking at October 7th. You may not agree with my conclusions or the way I am understanding the information that is available to us, but you should have a little bit of respect. If a person's track record is good and he's generally a clear thinker, don't be so quick to reject what he's saying. Okay, that's MS Nederes, where people have these blind spots where they have a little bit of the truth, they don't have all the truth. So that's one way of understanding it. I would explain it differently, and I haven't seen this anyplace else, but again, I think this fits our time like no other time, which would explain why none of the commentaries really explained it that way. And that is that there's no time in history where there's been so much information readily available to us, right? With the click of a mouse, we're overwhelmed with information, and for the life of us, we have no idea what's actually going on. People say, why am I reading the news even though I know it's fake news? Because I want to know what's going on. Believe me, you don't know what's going on, and if you didn't watch the news, you probably know more of what's going on than if you do watch it and you poison your mind with all kinds of lies. We have no idea. To this day, we have no idea what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. A very small idea at most. Who's actually fighting? Who's winning? Who's losing? Why are they fighting? What's it all about? No idea. Everybody's got a cell phone camera. They can take videos, send it to millions of people in real time, and we still have no idea what's going on. That's how MS Nederes. The truth is hidden from us like never before in history. We have so much access to information, and we still have no idea most of the time what's really going on. It's never happened like that in history before. Okay, Narim Pneis Kenim Yalbinu. The Bryce continues. The young people will whiten the faces of the old people. This is a phrase that means shaming them in public. The blood drains out of their face, so the face turns pale from shame. That they'll be so brazen that not only won't they have respect for their elders, but they'll publicly shame them. Okay, They'll make their faces turn white with embarrassment. The old people will stand up out of respect for the young people. The elders will stand up out of respect for the small. That's certainly, and I'm sure that this one has probably gone on at other times and places in history, but this is again one of the defining features of our time, where old people are reviled like never before. Old people are told, "You've lived your life already. Let's give you some medical assistance in dying. Let's shuttle you away to some nursing home. We don't want to hear your wisdom. We don't want to hear your experience. We don't want to hear your life lessons. We know better because we know how to use shiny things with screens better than you do. So we know a lot more than you do. We don't need you to help us and guide us." And that is a defining statement of our time. Ben min navel av, a son will make something vulgar out of his father. He'll treat his father in a vulgar way. Now, this is communism. This is the atheism of our times, where every child thinks he knows more than his parent, and he has no respect for his parent. He's more enlightened to his parent because he went to some institution where he paid tens of thousands of dollars to be brainwashed by some atheist. So he thinks he knows more to his parent, who is stupid enough to send it to work for his life, slaving away to be able to pay for his child to be brainwashed and turn against him. Right? That is also one of the defining features of our time. So what's the punishment? And I've said this to people who have become these liberal, enlightened people. I said, your punishment is that your children, if you ever have any children, are going to treat you exactly the same way as you've turned against your parents. You've turned against your parents. You think you know so much better than your parents, who are probably God-fearing people. Okay, and you've become some closet atheist. Maybe you have some token belief in Judaism and the Torah, but you don't really live that way. You have no fear of God, fear of heaven, and you've taught your children to mock everything about Judaism, to mock the Torah, to mock Hashem, to mock the way of doing things that we've done for thousands of years, and you have a new, better way of doing it. Well, your children are also going to think that you're a complete moron, that you're living in darkness. They're going to turn against you as well. That's the punishment, because that's how you're raising them, and what goes around comes around. Bas kama bi'ima, the daughter will rise up against her mother. Kala bichamosa, the daughter-in-law will rise up against her mother-in-law. By the way, it's become very common today in the Western world to make fun of mothers-in-law. Chazal didn't make fun of mothers-in-law. They taught us to have respect for our in-laws, just as we have respect for our own parents. We don't have in-law jokes in the Torah. We're taught to respect them. But now everything's a joke. We see in the sitcoms, right, that the men are the butt of all the jokes. The men are losers. The women are all these. The women are also put together, and the men are a bunch of losers. So we're taught to, Torah teaches you a wife is supposed to look up to her husband. A wife is supposed to have respect for her husband. Today, women are taught to look down on men, to just look down on men as being total losers. Why would anybody want to marry a loser or stay married to a loser? They have no respect, right? The daughters-in-law and sons-in-law are taught to have no respect for their in-laws, right? That's one of, again, the defining features of our time. Oive ish anshe beso. The enemies of a man are the people of his own home, right? A man should feel that his home is his palace, his sanctuary from the evils and craziness of the world. He steps into his home where he is loved, appreciated, and respected. In our time, that's the worst place for a man to be. Unfortunately, in many cases, is his own home. People, I heard a good line somewhere. I forget who told it to me. When singles want to escape, they go home, right? They're home, they're bachelors, they live alone. Married people leave their homes to escape, right? They leave their homes to escape. And that's very tragic, right? Certainly communism, where people had to be afraid of the people of their own homes, snitching on them, family members during COVID. This was also very common, this civil war in families and homes, people turning against each other. The worst enemies were the people who should have been their cherished loved ones. Pnei hador kifnei akelet. The face of the generation is like the face of a dog. This is explained in many, many different ways. Rashi and Sanhedrin explains it in two ways. First one is kind of funny. Rashi says over here, kifnei akelet, the damyan mamish l'kelet. They literally look like a dog. Rashi's first people look like dogs today. I don't know. You take that at face value if you'd like. Make a joke if you want. I'm sure there are people people say today that that the owners of pets sometimes resemble the pets. Okay, that's what Rashi says. That's what he heard from his Rebbe, Mori Rebbe. Lishnachrin, another way of explaining it, kifnei achelet, the face of a dog. Why? They don't have shame one from the other. It used to be that people who did certain types of sins were in the closet. They were ashamed of it, right? They did whatever they did, but they were ashamed. They didn't celebrate it. It wasn't a parade. That's what dogs do, right? A cat is very modest. A cat wants to use the bathroom. It goes into some private place. If a cat sees you, that you're watching it use the bathroom, or a cat is aware that you know that a cat will freak out. Cat needs its privacy. It's modest. A dog lifts up his leg and goes about his business. That's a dog. No shame, no shame. And that is one of the defining features of our times, where we are taught that we should not be ashamed of anything. Be proud of what you are. Be proud of who you are. You could be a totally degenerate scoundrel. Be proud of it and wave a flag and advertise it to the world and teach everybody to follow in your degenerate ways. That is the face of a dog, as Rashi explains it. I saw in the Steinsaltz and Sota, he has a note from, he cited Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman. He didn't cite the Sefer. I think I know the Sefer he's talking about, which I have. I own it, but I don't have it with me. And Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman writes, and what is one of the things that we know about a dog? Well, when you're walking the dog, who walks in front? The dog walks in front of the master, right? So he says that the leaders of the time are like dogs, where they're actually led by the people. They're walking in front. They're the leaders. They're the public face of the people, but they're actually dogs, and people are leading them. Okay, that's certainly true, but I would take it a step further than Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman did, because this is what we see going on in our time as well that was not going on so much. That is that the leaders themselves are being pulled on a string. They're on a leash. They're puppet leaders. Yeah, this is one world government thing. You think that you can vote out the leadership? You think if you just vote a little harder and smarter that you can vote out all the evil? They say, well, we lost the election. Let's just pack up and go home. You think the one world government is going to give you an actual choice? That they will allow for the possibility that somebody will rise up from the people and they could just vote him in? And they'll say, okay, we'll just give up everything because of that? Of course not. The whole thing is rigged. They own everybody. Okay, so that's the face of a dog, where regardless of what leader you have, he's being pulled on a string. He's in front. He's the public face of the nation, but the masters are holding the leash. They're hiding in the shadows, and those are the people literally pulling his strings. Again, not taking anything out of context. This is the literal meaning. Another explanation, by the way, that I thought of, and I saw something similar also in the commentaries, the face of a dog. What do we know about a dog? A dog is very loyal. A dog follows orders. Whoever owns the dog can train the dog to do anything it wants. The Nazis had dogs, right? And they did their bidding. They tore people to shreds. Good people have dogs, and dogs can be wonderful. They'll save the lives of their owners. There's a story in the Yerushalmi Trumos about a dog that saw that a snake had poisoned the food in the home, and the people were not aware of it. And the dog was barking to try to get their attention to not eat the food, and they didn't pay any attention to the dog. So finally, the dog jumped into the food and ate it and died. And then the people saw, of course, that the food was poisoned. And eat it, the dog gave up its own life to save the people. So dogs are very good. Good dogs are very, very good. They're loyal, but dogs also follow orders. They do what they're trained to do. And again, is that not one of the defining features of our time, where people simply follow orders? And even the people don't realize they're following the orders. They're following the experts. They're following the herd. They're following their crowd. They're fitting in with their little color war social group. And they'll do anything to keep on fitting in. They'll do anything to themselves and their children to just keep on fitting in. That's the way dogs act. They want to stay part of the pack. Dogs are very social. They have their packs, and they need to be part of their group. Okay, we don't want to be like dogs. On the one hand, we have to know when we should be humble and given to authority. Okay, there are rabbis or authority figures that at times we certainly have to defer to them. But at the same time, we always have to be critical thinkers and independent-minded, and know when even a formerly trusted person is saying the wrong thing. We have to be sensitive to that and not be afraid to go against it. Okay, but that's not the standard today. The standard today is to be like a dog with your tongue hanging out and just do what's expected of you. Let's finish the brisa. Haben Eino misbayesh me aviv. The son is not ashamed of his father. Interestingly, this is the last item on the list. Is similar to what we saw before. The son is not ashamed. And not too long ago, it was acceptable for a corporal punishment, right? Father could give a kid a zetz. Yeah, not beating the hell out of him, not actually abusing him. But there's room for that in Judaism. In fact, in Mishli itself, it says, spare the rod, spoil the child. If you hate your son, never punish him. If you really hate your son, the worst thing that you could do is never punish him. And sometimes, again, gently, but you have to show a physical sign that you are not pleased with the son, and that is a rebuke. My father, who is a godlike figure to me, there's three partners in bringing a child into the world: the mother, the father, and God. This father is my link to my predecessors, a link to the Torah dating back to Sinai, my link to God himself. He's the one who was teaching me Torah and guiding me in life. How could I ever do anything that goes against my father? How could I ever do something that makes my father sad or upset with me? Right? The son today is not ashamed. He's proud to go against his father, right? He's proud to show off that he doesn't care what his father says. And that is a sign that the whole world is broken, and therefore Moshiach needs to come soon. What do we have to rely when we are living in this world? That is a complete list. I took nothing out of context. All very simple meanings. What do we have to rely upon when we are living in a world like this? Alavinu Shabashamayim, on our Father in heaven. Only God. We cannot rely on Iron Dome. We can't rely on the United States. We can't rely on the IDF. We can't rely on safe rooms. We can't rely on our guns, on our ability to share information and be aware and be informed and be awake. We've got nothing to rely on except for Hashem. Okay, that's the Brisa in Sota. Let's go now to the parallel Gemara in Sanhedrin, which appears on Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph 97a. And we won't read the whole thing. This is a very long section of Gemara talking about the signs that Mashiach is imminent, most of which are very easy to understand, some of which may be cryptic and not so easy to fit into our times, but most of them are relatively easy to fit into our times, especially the ones that I've just mentioned. So we'll start off towards the bottom of the page. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa of Rabbi Nechemya Omer. Rabbi Nechemya says, Dor sheben David bo, the generation in which the son of David, meaning Mashiach, will come. Ha'azus tarba, the brazenness will increase. This was basically parallel to what we just read with minor variations. Va'yoker ya'aves, the increases of prices will corrupt people. Rashi gives two explanations over here. He says in the first one, he translates yoker not as price increases, but yakar, which is honor. The people will not show proper honor and respect for each other. And then he says that yoker does in fact mean inflation. And he says, hayoker ya'aves mechubat shebehen yehe avsan v'ramai. The price increases will cause even the straight shooters, the righteous people, to become tricksters and corrupt. Everybody will have to try to cheat the system. Okay, that's how Rashi explains it. The gefen yitain pirio, the vine will give forth its fruit, as we saw. V'hayayin b'yoker, nevertheless, the wine will be expensive. The nevcha kol hamalchus luminas, and all of the governments, as I mentioned before, will turn into apikarsis, fighting against Hashem. The ein tochacha, there is no rebuke. Messiah leila Rabbi Yitzchak, this supports Rabbi Yitzchak. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, for Rabbi Yitzchak said, ein ben David ba achetis hapech kol hamalchus luminas. The son of David will not come until all of the government turns into minus. Amar Rava said, my crop, what is the pasuk from the Torah that hints to this idea? Because I didn't pull anything out of a hat. There's a source for everything. Kulo hafach lavan taharhu. This is talking about saras, which is incorrectly translated as leprosy, which it doesn't have an actual English word. But if all of the skin turns white as a sign of impurity, then that is in fact a sign of purity. Meaning if a person has the impure sign over part of his body, then he is impure. But if it covers him from head to toe, then he becomes pure. So that's a hint to here. When the whole world is totally dark and tamei, and it doesn't mean literally every person, there's good people in the world, but it means when the world as a whole is impure, there's no place that you can go today to escape the impurity and the new world order. It's everywhere. You can't escape it. The whole world is basically run by these Nazis. So then the purity will eventually come. The Mashiach will come. Okay? Tana Rabbana, we learned in a Brisa, Ki Yodin Hashem Amo, for Hashem will judge his nation. That's Parshas Hazinu. Ki Yireh Ki Ozlas Yod, Hashem will see that all of the hand, meaning all of the power, has gone. We have no power left. The Efes Atzur V'Azuv. There's no help coming. There's no help. Atzur and Azuv is normally explained by the commentaries to mean that there's no money, there's no property left. Meaning people are helpless. They don't have the means to fight back. In the olden days in Israel, we had the ways and the means to fight our enemies. Today, we have the fantasy of an IDF, of a Jewish army that's fighting our enemies. They don't realize that is the enemy. They are, in fact, being used against us. Okay, but we don't realize we're really powerless. People say, what can we do? Can we overthrow the governments? No, I've always publicly said and even privately said, that's not what Hashem wants us to do. In principle, okay, there will be a time and place for judgment, and I'd love to I'd love to be part of that process, but no, Hashem does not want us to take matters into our own hands in the physical sense in that way. This is a spiritual problem that manifests itself in physical problems as well, but fundamentally it is a spiritual problem. We have to turn to Hashem, and then Hashem will give us the ways and means and the guidance and the proper time to be able to fight our enemies in the physical sense. But right now, we don't have the ability to do that, and trying to do that would only work against us. Okay, so that's Ozlas Yod. We don't have the power. We have the will, we have the wish to fight our enemies, but often, who is the enemy? Who do you even fight? Or what do you do? How do you even start? Nobody knows, and we can't do it. It would work against us. The Efes Asur Ba'azuv, okay, and there's no ways and means to do it. He continues, Ein ben David ba ache yirbu hamisoros. This is something we didn't see in Sota. The son of David will not come until there are a lot of Mosers. Mosers are traitors, people who turn in Jews, both their bodies and their monies, to the government, to the enemy. Well, that's what our government is, and that's what people have been doing, wittingly and unwittingly, snitching on their fellows, turning them in, especially during COVID, right? Turning people into the enemy for not following the edicts of the experts. That's a Moser. A lot of these rabbis, unfortunately, who took bribes, they are Mosers. They're literally Mosers. And if you know the Jewish law, you know we do it Mosers if we have the opportunity. Not advocating for that, just simply stating for informational purposes that you might want to look up what the law is. Not necessarily put it into practice, but at least we should learn the Torah and know what the Torah says about Mosers, and therefore we should at least have nothing to do with them. Davar Acher, another interpretation. Matu hatalmidim, till there will not be too many people studying Torah. Now, today, we do fortunately have many people studying Torah, but as I've said many times, the way we are learning and teaching Torah today is completely backwards. It's against Chazal. I gave a shir about this a few weeks ago, and unfortunately, there are people learning Torah, but they're not even learning the basics. They're not learning the basics. They're jumping straight to calculus. They're jumping straight to advanced Talmud and Pilpul and even spiritual, Kabbalistic things, and they can barely read. They don't even know the basics. So you don't have the Talmidim, you don't have the students studying ABC, studying the very beginnings of Judaism and then building a nice foundation from there. Davar Acher, another interpretation, this one is very interesting. Until there's no pennies, no coins left in the pocket, nothing left in the wallet. Now, what does this mean? Okay, so simply it means it's poverty, right? There's poverty, okay? But I'd like to take this a step further and say it's not necessarily poverty, because as we saw before, there will be great abundance, right? The food will be very expensive, but there will be abundance. What does it mean there's no money left in the pocket? Literally, there's no money. A cashless society. Isn't that what they're working towards today? And even though they haven't finished the job, it's still largely cashless, not completely cashless, but we're largely there. Most people have no money in their pocket. They have a card. They have an app. They have no cash. It's all sitting in the bank. It's a digital number. They don't have any actual assets. They don't have any actual money. There's no money in their pockets. Okay, that's not the way it should be. Okay, but that's the way the world is today. And if they finish the job, we will literally own nothing. That's what they say. You will have no money. No, it'll just be a digital fantasy that you have money floating around in the cosmos somewhere. Okay, that's techla putim and akes. There'll be no money in the pocket. Davar Acher. Okay, last one. Another interpretation. Achis yashu menagu, till they give up on the redemption coming. They will give up. Now, this is very bizarre. The Jewish people have never given up, will never give up, even in the darkest of times. We do not give up. That's one thing you can say about us. We are a stiff-necked people, both in a negative sense, but also in a very positive sense. We cling to Hashem. We are never going to give up. I'm certainly never going to give up. We don't give up. So what does this mean that we're going to give up? Okay? Things are going to get so bad, say we can't possibly be redeemed. So what does this mean? Shnamar, as it says, the Efes Asur V'Azuv. Okay, as we saw before, that there'll be no help, no ways and means to do this. Kaviyachol, in a manner of speaking, aim somech v'orzel Yisrael. There will be nobody helping and assisting Israel. It'll seem as if there's no help coming. Okay, so it seems that we would reach a certain point that we have never before reached in our history, God forbid, that we would give up on the redemption coming. But the Gemara continues, and it's clear from the context that that is not what it means. Jihad the Rabbi Zera. For this, the Rabbi Zera says, and I've never heard anybody say this before. I don't know if I came up with this idea. There's a lot of brilliant Torah scholars that we've had. If you heard of anybody else saying this, please bring it to my attention. For Rabbi Zera said, when he would find the rabbis were involved with this, Rashi explains they were involved in trying to figure out when Mashiach would come. They would try to calculate when Mashiach would come, which is a very common practice in this day. And I've written about this before as well. So Amarlu, he would say to them, B'matusa, I quoted this in the shir as well. I beg of you, said Rabbi Zera, but B'matusa, Ba'ina minaychu, I beg of you, please, Lo terachkua, do not distance Mashiach. Do not push Mashiach away, meaning what you are doing, you're trying to calculate and figure out when he's going to come. That dafka distances him. That pushes him away. The Tanina, for we learned, Gimel boin behesachadas. 3 things come without people paying attention. They just come. You're totally unaware. Eluain, these are the 3. Moshiach. Moshiach comes when you least expect it. It's one ordinary day. Suddenly, boom, he's here. Okay. Mitzia, you find something. You find something that you lost, or find some money in the street. You certainly weren't expecting it. You just happened upon a treasure. The akrav, and a scorpion bite. You're certainly not expecting that. Suddenly, boom, you get bitten by something. But Mashiach is one of the 3 that comes when you don't expect it. So if you're calculating it and you're expecting him to come at a particular time, well, then you're messing with this. You say, oh, Hashem can't let you figure out when he's going to come. So by definition, he's going to make you be wrong, and you're maybe pushing Mashiach away. So what does it mean that Mashiach will not come until we give up? Yerush means we're giving up. We're giving up on trying to figure things out. That's what it means. Give it up already. A lot of people have tried figuring out when he's going to come, and one thing they have in common is that they've all been wrong. Give it up. That's not what Hashem wants us to do. He'll come whenever he comes. Right now, we have a job to do. We have things that we need to do. Before Mashiach comes, we have our own jobs to do. And in fact, trying to figure out when Mashiach comes and even force the issue, say, if we do this, Mashiach will come, that causes Mashiach to be distant. And there are movements in Israel today, specifically one that thinks their dead rabbi is coming back to be Mashiach. But there are other movements as well that are very into this messianic mentality. Believe me, I want Mashiach to come as much as anybody else. Daven for it every day, of course. Think about it all the time. But the people who are obsessed with it, to the extent that they're saying, do this, this will bring Mashiach, this will bring Mashiach. We have to be obsessed with bringing Mashiach. Our goal in life is to bring Mashiach. They are, I think, working for the dark side. They are, in fact, influencing Jews unawares to do the things that will cause Mashiach to be pushed off. We're not supposed to do things to bring Mashiach. We're supposed to live properly, and the Mashiach will come in the right time. Obviously, we want Mashiach to come. Obviously, all the good things that we do are helping the cause. But we're not supposed to calculate when Mashiach will come or try to strategize how we will bring Mashiach. It's not our job to bring Mashiach. It's not our job to say, we want Mashiach now. What if now is not the right time? We want Mashiach to come as soon as possible, as gently as possible, in the right way, according to the unfolding of Hashem's plan, in the best way possible for us. But we should not be obsessed with calculating it, figuring it out, or trying to strategize and force the issue. That, in fact, only pushes Mashiach off. So these are the primary signs from the Gemara in Sota, and in Sanhedrin. I've spoken about this many times in the past, but never all at once. So I hope it gives us some good insight as we are entering Sukkot. Chazal say that the final war of Gog and Magog will be fought on Sukkot. Let it be this Sukkot. I'm a little skeptical that things can happen so quickly. But again, Mashiach comes when you least expect it. So maybe it will, in fact, come this Sukkot. Next week, when we have the Shir on Sukkot, I'll talk about as well how Sukkot is especially relevant for the situation in which we are going through, and try to connect it to why the final war should happen over Sukkot, why Sukkot over any other holiday. But we'll save that for next week. I see a bunch of questions and comments, so let me take a quick scan over here. I see some interesting comments. Okay. Bear with me. Okay, I see one question from Lawrence. When a congregation is basically following government orders, such as closing down the synagogue, essentially ostracizing those refusing to get injected and wear masks because the experts say so, how does he remain part of the community when the community turns against him? Well, he may not be able to. You may not be able to. Obviously, we want to be part of a community. Many of our mitzvahs cannot be performed outside of a community. But if your community is evil people, you got to leave the community or start your own community. Again, you're probably not the only person who feels this way. For every person who's bold enough to speak out, there's a lot of people who wish they had the courage, who agree with him, who are looking for a leader to do this. In fact, my own mother, when I was railing recently about people should not pay attention to the sirens and not huddle in their unsafe rooms. So my mother was in Beit Shemesh a couple of weeks ago when the siren sounded. She was in a community center of mostly Dati Leumi statists who made a religion out of serving the state and the highest ideal to die for the state. Utterly brainwashed, very good people at heart, but unfortunately totally brainwashed, and it's going to be very hard for them to break out of the brainwashing, probably more so than any other segment of society. And I say that as somebody who grew up very close to that world, never fully really fitting into it. But again, I'm a YU guy. Grew up in YU, Long Island, Queens. I mean, this is where I grew up and how I was educated, and I've completely turned away from that. Other people have to, go through that process as well of waking up and realizing that real Jewish history are not the things that we learned in Jewish history class. But anyway, so the siren sounded, and my mother, bless her, was not afraid. And everybody was sort of huddled in a certain room where they had to be. And my mother said, I'm going to go out. And when people were afraid, and when she left, she said other people followed her. There were a few other women who followed her out as well. They didn't have the courage to do it on their own. But when one person sets the example, other people follow. They don't want to be the sucker who stays behind. They see that, oh, it's okay for you. You must know something that maybe we shouldn't be afraid so much. One person leads, other people follow. So if one person says, I'm not going to be part of a shul that does this to people, who's with me? Other people will follow. If one person says, I'm not going into a death trap just because somebody who wore ribbons on his army vest told me so, who's with me? Believe it or not, other people will be with you. It starts to raise voices. People will get the courage when one person does it. When you have a loud mouth like me who says things, I'm like Nachshon ben Aminadav, I jump into the sea first, other people will follow. They may not be willing to go as far as me. They may be sort of looking over their shoulder. Is it okay? Is it safe? But once I say something that is a little bit extreme, a little bit radical, and makes it safer for the next person to then be the quote unquote moderate one. Say, well, I don't always agree with Rabbi Weissman. Sometimes he goes too far. I don't like the way he talks, but maybe this much is okay. It sort of pushes the envelope in the right direction. That's what the bad guys do. They're always pushing the envelope the wrong way, right? And then other people follow along. So we have to do that on the good side as well. Be willing to push the envelope a little bit, and then other people will gradually follow. All right, that's the class for today. I'll see you all next week. Wishing everybody